We're learning more details about one of the CIA's most highly protected assets, who reportedly was extracted by U.S. intelligence from Moscow. According to the New York Times, a mid-level Russian official was recruited just decades ago and rapidly advanced within Russian President Vladimir Putin's office. And the official had an influential position that came with the access to the highest levels of the Kremlin. Well, the report also says that the agent sent back secrets to Washington played an instrumental role in uncovering Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election. It's believed that the increasing media scrutiny into Russian meddling put the asset at risk, and it prompted the CIA to pull the high-level operative from Moscow in 2017. But Russia's downplaying reports of a spy in Putin's administration. The Kremlin says that this man worked in Putin's office but had no contact with the Russian president. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who previously was the director of the CIA, rejected the Times reporting.
The reporting is materially inaccurate, and you should know, as the former CIA director, I don't talk about things like this very often. It is only the occasions when there's something that I think puts people at risk, or the reporting is so egregious as to create enormous risk to the United States of America, that I even comment in the way that I just did, and I won't say anything more about it. I know the CIA put out a statement. Suffice to say that the reporting there is factually wrong.
Michael Allen joins me now. He's a special assistant to President George W. Bush at the National Security Council and also a former staff director for the House Select Committee on Intelligence. He now serves as managing director for Beacon Strategies. So, Michael, first, I want to get your reaction to this news.
Well, I think it's catastrophic for U.S. intelligence. We very clearly had a gold-plated asset, someone who could bring to light some of the mysteries of what's going on inside Putin's government, and for us to, sloppily handle the information so that it becomes public and that we're required to take this extraordinarily dangerous action of exfiltrating a Russian government official back to the United States. It's lamentable that we got to this point where we had to go through these extraordinary measures.
The New York Times called this spy one of the CIA's most important sources. If that is in fact true, how does this affect intelligence gathering for the U.S. and Russia?
Well, I think it's going to be a grave setback. In the intelligence business, you talk about hard targets. And what's that code for? It's code for the Chinese Politburo and the inner sanctum of the Kremlin. It apparently had one of these gold-plated sources, and we've lost that individual, so it's tragic. But it's not just the information that we lose in this case. It's also the message it sends to other people that the CIA is trying to recruit around the world. It says, hey, we may not be able to keep you safe, and so those people will think twice before they work with the United States government against their own government. So there's a lot of repercussions to what you're seeing right now.
I don't think people realize just how difficult it is to get an asset like this, to cultivate it, maintain that relationship. There's a fabulous book called The $1 Billion Spy by David Hoffman of the Washington Post. I love that book, and it gives you a sense of, during the Soviet Union, how hard it was to gain and maintain those sources. So when you talk about intelligence gathering, what's the chill factor, the chilling effect that could come for other people who might want to come forward and work with the U.S. on an intelligence level, but might be fearful of this example?
Well, I think you've got the term down. It's a massive chilling effect because it says, hey, listen, you have a highly politicized, pressurized political system in Washington, D.C. I don't want to get in the middle of that and have my name leaked out into the media or have you mistreat me as part of a political dispute in Washington, D.C. So they'll say, listen, I'm just not willing to take such a risk. And when you think about if you were in a place like Russia where death will meet you if you're caught while you're in Russia, or frankly, after you've left and dozens of years later, the Russians are still hunting you down. And think of the numerous examples of a political assassination, Alexander Litvinenko in London with polonium-210, and of course the Skripals in England within the last few years. I think this sends a message to everyone who is Russian that might want to work with the United States that it's not worth doing it. Now, I hope they'll conclude otherwise. I think it is, because I think we're a force for good, but it's a huge chilling effect, as you say.
I also want to ask you about the other big story of the day, the exit of National Security Advisor John Bolton. Sources have told us Bolton was running his own show, didn't keep the president's priorities in mind. How unusual is this for someone in this role to sort of be dismissed like this? And also, if it's true, you know, that he really wasn't doing what the president had wanted, how problematic is that for his shop?
I think that, well, it's not so unusual, I think, for the Trump administration anymore. He seems to sort of get out the guillotine and unceremoniously dump all kinds of advisors. But it is extraordinary for it to be happening as frequently as it has within this administration. This individual, I think John Bolton, clearly didn't get along with the president, advanced things with regard to Iran and the use of force to places where I don't think the president was willing to go, as illustrated by the episode of whether or not we were going to hit Iran after the shoot down of our drone a few months ago. And so I don't think they got along at all. We saw this again with regard to the Afghanistan peace talks. And so finally, they have fallen out. They have irreparable damage now. And so now we'll just see what happens as John Bolton vows to strike back.
So, Michael, when you're talking about a replacement, as the president says he's going to be mulling over the next week, you look at the situation with Iran, with North Korea, with Afghanistan. There's a lot on the foreign policy side that this administration has to deal with. What type of person should he be looking for? Is there someone that you would recommend? What type of, qualities do you think that this president needs?
I think, one, you have to have somebody who certainly has the president's trust, because we want the president to listen to this person as an advisor. But, of course, you want this person to have significant national security and foreign policy credentials. But you also want someone who appreciates the role of the national security advisor. It's not always to force his or her own views upon the rest of what we call the interagency, the national security bureaucracies, but it's to be an honest broker, someone who will say, this is what the Secretary of Defense's view is, here's how the State Department might approach it differently, here are some options you might consider, Mr. President. So you really need an honest broker in that particular role. I don't know many people who have said John Bolton fulfilled that aspect of the mission. But we definitely need that going forward. So we need an expert, and we need someone who will broker differences, honestly.
Michael Allen, so grateful you could join us, Michael.
Thanks, Rena.
You bet.